Hello, my name's Rod Matthews and welcome to the 21-day Millionaire Mindset Challenge, and good on you for doing it. Before I reveal what my topic is, I just want to start by telling you a little story. I can remember when the Olympics was on in Beijing, they interviewed a gentleman by the name of Scott Volkis. He's the head of Queensland Swimming. He's trained a number of Olympians. And they asked him that question that always comes out when the Olympics is on, how fast can we actually swim? How fast can we run? What is the limits of human ability? How is it possible that we keep breaking records every Olympics? His answer was excellent. He said, well, there is no one thing that allows us to break records. What there is lots and lots of little tiny things. And it's when we can string enough of these tiny things together, that's when we break records. For example, the chemical composition of the water in the pool at Beijing is superior to the chemical composition of the water that was in the pool in Munich, for the sake of argument. Now, when I heard that, I can remember thinking to myself, what? You've got to be kidding. But then I remembered when the Olympics was in Sydney and they were opening the new pool at Homebush Bay, and they were interviewing the Olympic swimmers who'd just finished swimming in it and saying to them, what do you think of the new pool? What do you think of the new pool? Every single one of them said, oh yeah, it's really fast. And I can remember thinking, you got to be kidding. It's made of concrete. It's in the ground. It's full of water. It ain't moving. But this is what they're referring to. They're referring to things like the chemical composition of the water in the pool, things like the lane ropes. Okay, so what we know about lane ropes and their ability to smooth the water and stop overflow into other lanes, etc., is better than what we knew 20, 30, 40 years ago. Being able to correct stroke from under the water, as well as being able to correct stroke from above the water. Sports psychology, sports physiology, all of these things, when you stick enough of these things together, all of these things enable us to be able to set new standards, to be able to break records. It's the same with the millionaire mindset. There is no one thing that will enable you to have a millionaire mindset, whatever that is. What there is lots and lots of little tiny things. And it's when you string enough of these little tiny things together that you start to stand out. So this is what I'd like to talk to you about today. How to recognize those lots and lots of little tiny moments. And they're often moments when we're dealing with other people, other stakeholders in the business. Customers, team members, shareholders, other people who are involved in the business. Every time we deal with those people, it's a moment. It's an opportunity to add one of those little tiny things. So I can imagine that if I was sitting where you are, I'd be thinking to myself at this point, but Rod, don't you just have those days? Those days where the synapses just don't seem to line up and you're thinking to yourself, I should have just stayed in bed. Today should have been a doona day. How do you deal with those days? Well, that's a good place to start, because asking ourselves the question, what causes those days, or how do those days start, that gives us a bit of an indication as to how to increase the number of times that we can do a good day. So, with that in mind, let's ask the question, how do you do a bad day? Well, how you do a bad day is bad days tend to start with some sort of trigger. Something will happen to make you start to think, that will make you start to think, that will lead to a certain attitude. So, for example, you might have one of those mornings where you're lying in bed and you're thinking to yourself, it seems a little bit lighter than it normally is at this time of day. And then all of a sudden you realise, the alarm hasn't got off. So you race out of bed, you don't have time to have breakfast, you have to quickly rush through your shower, throwing on clothes, you hop into the car, you get caught in traffic because you're later than normal, you're late for a meeting that you know someone important's going to be there, so you go to try and phone them, you're looking for your mobile phone, you've left it at home. Okay, chances are if you have that sort of morning, you're going to be starting to think to yourself, you're going to have a certain attitude, and that attitude will be something like, I should have stayed in bed, today should have been a doona day. The interesting thing about that, of course, is that attitudes are linked to behaviours. So if I'm thinking to myself, today's going to be a bad day, it is almost impossible to not have that show through into my behaviours. I'm going to have a frown on my face, I'm going to be sitting down working away, and in comes a team member who wants to engage me in conversation. And they come up to me and they say, Rod, we've got a bit of a problem with so-and-so and such, can I get you to have a look at this? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably do things like I'm going to keep my hands on the keyboard. I'm going to keep looking at the screen. I'm going to give them sentences of 7 words or less and a forced smile. So I'm going to do something like, yep, fine. If that's what you reckon, whatever. Yep, okay, great. I'm going to do this, all right? Increases the likelihood that this is how I will behave. Then, of course, what happens is, of course, the person I'm working with will notice this, and my behaviours will generate a certain result. In this case, the person they could be quite overt about it, and they could be quite rude. They could say something like, oh, forget it, you're obviously having a bad day, don't worry about it, I'll go somewhere else. They could be quite full on about it. At very least, most people are going to respond by saying something like, oh, no, it's all right, don't worry about it, I'll fix it, it'll be all right. They'll roll their eyes and then they'll walk out, and as they're walking out, they go, don't go in there, do not go in there, I don't know what's wrong with him today, don't. They'll do something like this. And then, of course, what's going to happen is those results, as they're walking out and they're behaving that way, I'm going to see those results and I'm going to go, see, today's a bad day. I told you. Now they've got it in for me as well. I can't seem to take a trick today. So, triggers lead to attitudes, lead to behaviours, leads to results, leads to attitudes, leads to behaviours, leads to results. It becomes a cycle. The opposite can also be true as well. I'll leave triggers aside. So how you do a good day is, of course, the opposite of this. Now, I'll come back to triggers in a moment. I'm not avoiding them. I will come back to them in a moment. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that you're feeling a bit more buoyant than usual at the beginning of a day. So chances are your behaviours are going to be a little bit different then. Someone comes in and you're working away and someone says, Rod, we've got a bit of a problem with such and such and so and so. I need you to have a look at this. I'm more likely to take my hands off the keyboard, look directly at the person, smile, a genuine smile, listen to what they've got to say, ask them questions. Yep, fine. Okay, great. Yeah, look, I've seen this before, and I think what we need to do here is, all right, I'm more likely to respond like this. That, of course, will increase the likelihood that the result's going to be a little bit different. Increase the likelihood that I'm going to get a result of something like, oh, okay, thanks for that. Yeah, no, that makes sense. No, I was a bit worried about that, but no, that's great. That'll be fantastic. Thank you very much. And they'll walk out of my office going, thank you very much. So therefore, when I see people walking out of my office going, thanks for that, that's great, I'm thinking to myself, I'm on fire. So triggers lead to attitudes, leads to behaviours, leads to results. Now, I can understand the more cynical people listening to this might be thinking to themselves, oh yeah, right, okay, great. Power of positive thinking. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Let me just change your little scenario here just to see how your little theory holds up, shall we? Let's just say, I don't know, that you've just bought a new car. All right, and you just drive out of the showroom, you pull up at the very first set of traffic lights, and the person behind you doesn't see your brake lights. Are you telling me, power of positive thinking, that I should hop out of the car, run up to this person, shake them by the hand and say, thank you so much. Oh, what an excellent opportunity to get the car resprayed. Wonderful, thank you, thank you. Of course, they'd think you were crazy. For me, the answer to this comes back to the serenity prayer, which goes something like this. Grant me the courage to change that which I can, the serenity to live with what I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. Here, what you can change is your attitude and your behaviours. Unless you are disabled in some way, you have control over your own attitude and your behaviours. What you do not have control over is you do not have any control over the triggers. Stuff's going to happen. And you do not have complete control over the results. I am one of many inputs into my team members' day, not the sole input. So perhaps the serenity prayer becomes, grant me the courage to change my own attitude, my own behaviours, the serenity to live with the triggers and the results, and a 21-day challenge to know the difference. So there is no one thing that creates a millionaire mindset. What there is lots and lots of little tiny things. Every interaction with your team members, with your customers, with other stakeholders in your business, every interaction with you is one of those little moments. And how you think and how you behave in that moment is going to be one of those tiny things that is going to increase the likelihood that you have a millionaire mindset. Thanks very much for listening.